Hello, scholars. Welcome. Professor Henkle here. Today, we are going to talk about marine pollution. This is not the happiest subject. It's not the most promising for humanity and the fate of our species on this earth, but it is a very, very important topic for us to understand, to know, to discuss, to have a conversation about, so that we can make decisions and take actions today to ensure the sustainability, the viability, the habitability of our planet in the future. So there's an intersection of oceanography and environmental science that we get into. I also teach environmental science. You're welcome to take that with me anytime, where we go really into that specific interaction of science and human practices. There's no way to talk about marine pollution without it, because marine pollution, while it can be natural, is really because of humans. Humans are polluting the marine environment. So, spoiler alert, this is not going to be a very fun lecture, but this will be a very important lecture because of what we'll discuss. So, here we see the Sewage Surfer, National Geographic Top 10 Photograph Award. Here we go. Photographing a little seahorse. Beautiful. That seahorse picked up a Q-tip and decided to travel with it. And so this really shows the impact, the prevalence of trash, of litter, of plastics in the marine environment. So what are we doing? We're looking at pollution. It's a major issue. We'll talk about environmental problems associated with point source and non-point source pollution. We get into the various types of pollutants: biological, petroleum, chemical, plastics, which are these 4 points, and then we'll look at the steps that you and I can take on a daily basis to help prevent marine pollution from happening. So, very generally, a pollution is defined as any harmful substance. That is very, very broad. It can be aesthetically unappealing but not harmful, but it can also be aesthetically unappealing and harmful. Pollution might be gross and in your face like this, or it might be undetectable in chemical concentrations that are causing harm. Pollution is harmful to living organisms. It's a hindrance to marine activities, and it leads to a reduction in seawater quality. So pollution in the oceans has a myriad of effects that affect the marine environment. There's a lot of different ways pollution ends up in the oceans. Unfortunately, intentional dumping is one. Ignorance is another, not even knowing that we're causing the problem, which is why this is so important. Education in general. What are we doing here? Developing skills, increasing our earning potential, expanding our awareness. We're turning the light on in the room so that we can see what is in there. Man-made products become pollution when exposed to natural processes that move them through the natural environment. Certain materials, metals, paper, can decay. Others, plastics, long residence life, glass, can survive almost indefinitely. We've got certain things like bags, nets, fishing lines that trap, injure, and strangle marine creatures. No good. Small plastic objects can be consumed and stop the digestive tract of organisms. And then inks, dyes, metals, toxins from cigarette butts can all become poisonous, toxic on all the different trophic levels. So, I know, it's sad. Oh, sea turtles. We love sea turtles. They're really cool if you've ever seen one, swam with one, or you've just seen one in a photo. So sea turtles, young especially, they love to eat. They're hungry little things, and when there's trash in the ocean, they eat the trash, and it's not good. Sea turtles are not meant to eat plastic and styrofoam. So here's a list. This is what we will do for the next little bit of our lecture, is go through all the different types of pollution: point source, non-point source, biological, petroleum, sewage, sludge, DDT and PCB, mercury, these are chemicals, metals, and finally, plastics, probably the most important of all of them. We will save the best for last. So pollutants, excuse me, come in many forms, in many substances, in many shapes and sizes from all over. And the impact of a pollutant is going to depend on the concentration, on the properties, the reactive capabilities with other substances, on what they convert into, how they become concentrated through both physical and biological processes. So it's a complex interaction. When pollutants are introduced into the marine environment, how do they interact within that ecosystem to cause negative impacts? And it varies based on pollutant, and it varies based on the properties of what that pollutant is and how it interacts with that ecosystem. So, point source. This is a very specific location. Here is a drainage pipe discharging untreated wastewater directly into the ocean. Now, it is a point source because we can pinpoint the location. EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, thank goodness they're creating all kinds of wonderful environmental policy, is any single identifiable source of pollution from which pollutants are discharged, such as a pipe, a ditch, a ship, a factory, smokestack. Now, a smokestack would deliver air pollution. A pipe could deliver marine pollution to the ocean. Non-point sources are when the pollution comes from a broad area and we're not really sure. The best example of this is going to be a watershed with agriculture. Now, there's all these different farms putting varying amounts of runoff, fertilizers, on their crops. And then when it rains, that fertilizer mixes with runoff and is delivered to a river. Those rivers combine, tributaries combine into bigger rivers, and then eventually they make their way to the ocean. And what we see is the harmful effects in the ocean of everything that is upstream. In this case, for our example, it would be urban runoff from all these homes. Where's all this pollution coming from? Well, there's not a single pipe that's emitting. It's the collection of everything. So it's hard to pinpoint the origin. Trash washes down storm drains to the ocean. We've got road oil, pesticides, and fertilizers that all wash into drains, creating non-point source pollution and non-point source trash. Now, biology, which basically means life, can also be a pollutant. Inherently, life is not a pollutant in the environment, but there are certain cases where species from one area have transported to another area, becoming invasive species, and they are harmful to the local species that were there already. So, fish in the ocean are not pollutants. Phytoplankton in the ocean are not pollutants. But zebra mussels, endemic to the Caspian Sea in Europe, that have latched onto boats, made their way into canals, into lakes, into estuaries, and all the way even over to the Great Lakes, are a biological pollutant because they are harmful to the local species that are native to that area. This happens all over the board. This is a huge issue, invasive species. It's a ecosystem sciences topic, but a little bit out of the scope. What is in the scope is biology can be a pollutant when a certain organism harms other organisms in a place that is not native or natural to. Case in point is going to be Caulerpa taxifolia, a really big seaweed. It's a seagrass that washed onto the Southern California beaches, onto the Southern California shore. In 2000, they found it, probably because somebody had it in their fish tank, cleaned their fish tank. Boom, marine pollution washes from land to sea. A lot of money, a lot of chemicals, and even some legislation went in to outlaw and eradicate Caulerpa taxifolia in 2006. Now, this is seen over and over again. Here's our couple examples. This killer alga. And you can see how thick this is? What else is living here? Nothing, because this seaweed is going to come in, this algae is going to come in and completely overtake the environment, use all the resources, outcompete all the other species, making it harmful, making this a harmful substance, which is the definition of pollution. Here's a big one. Petroleum. We live in the oil age. Oil powers our worlds. We are dependent on it for everything we do. Now, there's a lot of big steps taken to divest from oil, but currently we are still there. And so, oil is made of hydrocarbons, which have the elements hydrogen and carbon. They're organic and can be biodegraded, and oil inherently is a natural product of the environment. Oil that enters the ocean is a result of small, frequent, widespread release of oil related to human consumption. That's about half of it. Oil actually seeps naturally in the ocean too. That's the other half. And the way that we get our oil is by pumping it up and transporting it long distances to oil refineries where it's turned into gasoline and kerosene and all the other usable formats that we need oil in our lives. So hydrocarbons form toxic compounds. They're capable of causing injury or death. When there's oil spills, they cover, here's another sea turtle, they cover wildlife, making it hard for them to live. Oil, or toxic compounds, hydrocarbons, can cause sickness in humans, animals, and plants in small doses. Over the long term, it can change the genetics and create abnormalities and even lead to decreased embryo survival. So anything is a poison in certain doses. Water can be a poison. Hypernatremia, too much water. If we consume too much salt, that becomes a poison. Too much oil in our environment is toxic. Now, the lithosphere is the biggest reservoir of oil, of these hydrocarbons, but very rapidly we pump them out, we burn them, put them in the atmosphere, we spill them and dump them into the marine environment. And so this is what we're looking at now. Oil spills are large volume accidents that inject quantities of oil into the environment. And here are the biggest five. Exxon Valdez, 1989. East Tok 1, 1979. Deepwater Horizon, 2010. And this is in order of relative size, and you can see the size of the circles. The Persian Gulf, 1991. Intentional dumping. But then, oh, what's this? The annual input of oil from daily household uses, such as transportation. Oh. So there are these large punctuated events, but then there's the amount that happen every single year. Okay, we're going to talk more about that, but first, large events. 1989, the Exxon Valdez, which is a boat off of the coast of Alaska. There's a trans-Alaskan pipeline that transports oil across. It's loaded onto tankers. Those tankers come all the way down to the oil refineries of Northern California and other places. And it hit the rocks, broke it open, and then all the oil spilled. About 11.6 million gallons of oil into the Prince William Sound. So Exxon had to spend about $2 billion in cleanup, 900, almost $1 billion in restoration, using hot water to clean the rocky beaches and also cleaning off the biology, the organisms that were living there. If you go to some of these locations, there's still puddles of oil. You could pick up a rock and there's oil. So the long-term effects of this are still being learned. Okay, pretty big. This shocked the nation, made headlines. East Toke 1 was in Mexico. This was an exploratory well where they hit oil, and then they couldn't cap it for 10 months, and it spilled 140 million gallons. Same process happens, but now this happens in the Gulf of Mexico, along Mexico, and then also some of the shores of Texas. You may remember this, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico. It happened with an explosion that killed 11 people and then dumped oil into the Gulf for 87 days, releasing over 200 million gallons. Now think about holding a gallon of water. Now imagine holding a gallon of oil. Now imagine holding 200 million gallons of oil. That's so much oil that was dumped. So birds, sea turtles, marine mammals, fish, and shellfish were all affected. There's still effects that are happening, and the long-term effects are still being studied. This is the worst oil spill in U.S. history. Accidental, intentional, the Persian Gulf War, intentional dumping in 1991 as a war tactic. So it's 20 times the amount of the Exxon Valdez on purpose. Oh, it's so sad. So we can see how thick the oil is here. We can see the extent of how far the oil traveled, and there is severe oil pollution that was released from this event. But when we look at how much oil has been dumped into the ocean, oil spills are not the primary source of oil in the ocean. In fact, the primary source is actually going to be petroleum seeps and human activity. So human sources are about 53%. Natural sources are 47%. So that means this is a natural process. But we've almost doubled the amount of oil that's being delivered to the environment every single year. And how do we do it? Well, through consumption, through extraction a little bit, through transportation a little bit. But really, this is the small but frequent and widespread uses of gas dripping from the gas gas station, of oil spilling when we're changing it, of oil leaks happening. The compound effects of 7+ billion people add up to a very large impact. So when we spill oil, we got to clean it. How do we do that? Well, we can use bacteria and fungi to help clean the oil spills in this process of bioremediation. We can clean and skim because oil leads to high fatality rates, covering the feathers of birds. It completely stains areas, but when oil is in the ocean, it floats and then it disperses. We can skim it, and when it mixes with water, it forms what's called a mousse, and then that is a little bit easier. Dawn dish soap has been pivotal in helping to clean marine species from these large events in the past. So what do we do? Stop using oil? Hopefully, eventually, we'll have alternatives. The technology and the resources, the policy, and the public will all align in that direction. But for now, it's not. And so public policy, government policy, like the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. Oh, what? A year after Exxon Valdez? So Exxon Valdez was big. It was huge. It was a natural disaster, an ecological disaster. So single-hull tankers were barred from the U.S., not allowed within 200 miles of France and Spain, requiring double-hull tankers, which led to a redesign of oil tankers and the ships. Basically, environmental policy is the ways in which the government can help to guide industry in ways that are more sustainable. And this is in response to a public outcry. So if people like you and me are upset over the way that things are happening, we can take local action and rally our legislation to enact policy that regulates these big companies that are polluting and destroying our earth. We have a lot of individual power, you and I do, and especially when it comes to voting. So, a little segue, don't forget to vote this election and every election. And if you care about the environment, find a politician with an environmental agenda, someone who says, I actually care about the environment, and vote for them. Okay, so different types of pollutants, point source, non-point source, biological, petroleum. Sewage sludge, what is this? Well, it is the solid material produced as a byproduct during sewage treatment of industrial or municipal wastewater. I really love my toilet, and I feel very grateful for plumbing and the fact that my waste disappears with a flush. Magically, it just goes away and I never have to worry about it again. Except for, it does have to go somewhere. The history of plumbing is fascinating. If you have never thought about it, a quick Google search, what is the history of plumbing? Check it out. It's a rabbit hole that could take you all night down a really fun road. But for now, we have plumbing, and our waste goes through the plumbing to a wastewater treatment facility where it undergoes primary treatment, removing the solids, secondary treatment, killing the chlorine, and removing the water from the sludge. And then what do we do with that sludge? Where does it go? Well, for a long time, I have a great idea. Let's dump it to the ocean. Point source pollution of sewage entering a waterway. So this happened for a long time. Sewage sludge was either piped to the ocean or it was loaded on top of ships and then dumped in the ocean. But along the way, people started to recognize this is not a good idea. This is harming the oceans. This is harming the environment. And it's making the oceans really dumpy, really nasty, really foul. Remember, this is the collection of human waste that's just going straight into the ocean. The oceans are not that big, and they feel the effects. They're not an unending reservoir that can just take everything. So the Marine Protection Research Sanctuaries Act of 1972 started policy, and then we fast forward almost 20 years later to the Ocean Dumping Ban Act of 1988, making it unlawful to dump into the oceans. Thank goodness that these things came up. So, case study, Boston Harbor Sewage Project. Boston Harbor, known as the dirtiest harbor in America because all of the sewage waste from the surrounding cities, the city of Boston, went straight into the harbor, and it was nasty. You wouldn't want to go there. You definitely wouldn't want to jump in. Some people rallied the courts. The court ordered a cleanup, and then a whole new wastewater treatment facility. You can, it's a little blurry here, but you can see a nice big complex. Nothing here. Here it is. Now look, the water is blue. Here, the water is full of sludge and is nasty. This is a win for environmental remediation, cleaning up a contaminated area, changing current practices in a way that is much more sustainable and doing much less degradation to the environment. So sewage is a big deal. It's waste. It's a pollutant. It can harm organisms. And it will continue to be a big deal moving into the future, especially as our human population grows ever bigger and bigger. Some chemicals, DDT, PCBs. Rachel Carson was a profound scientist. She did a lot of work in the 1950s, the 1960s. She wrote a book called The Sea Around Us, which talks about oceanography at the time. Pretty cool. Check it out. She wrote the book Silent Spring, which is a landmark piece of work that shined the light on the disruption and the death that DDT was causing. A chemical that was used to mitigate pests, to preserve crops, but it started to kill everything. And it got into the environment, and it accumulated over time. And now there was so much DDT in the past that it's still in the soil. It's still in some of the biology. There's probably DDT in you and I still living because of how widespread it was. DDT was widespread in the oceans. It's an organic pollutant. It's toxic, it has a long life, it dissolves in seawater, and it accumulates. This is a barrel of DDT found off the coast of Southern California with 25,000 other barrels, because when it was outlawed in 1972, somebody went, uh-oh, what are we going to do with all this DDT? I know. Let's dump it in the ocean. I wonder how they felt, the people on that boat who were just kicking barrels of DDT off the boat, going, nothing could be wrong with this. I feel like I would just be thinking, oh, this stuff is so harmful and so toxic that it's not even legal anymore. We shouldn't just throw it in the ocean. That's a bad idea. So, as I said, it was widely used, banned in 1972. One of the biggest things is that it thinned the eggshells of birds, and so bird mortality went skyrocketed, especially for osprey, brown pelicans. They have since made a major rebound, removing this toxic compound from the environment. Another environmental win. There's a lot of environmental wins, and we really have to focus on these as we move forward. It's not that we're stuck and we can't do anything. In fact, humans have been doing amazing things for a really long period of time. Let's keep it up, I say. Let's keep going with the amazing things, not with the polluting things. PCBs used in coolant, insulation to transformers, wiring, paints, caulk, hydraulic oils. They get into the environment through ingestion, through the soil, through spills into the marine environment. They evaporate into the atmosphere, and they cause all kinds of problems. Genetic mutations, reproductive issues. So these were banned also. No more PCBs, no more DDT. These are toxic chemicals that are horrible for the environment. And a little bit, maybe not so bad, but a little bit in a lot of different places can bioaccumulate. So that means that the PCBs or some pollutant is absorbed low in the food chain, phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are eaten by zooplankton, so it magnifies from one layer to the other. Zooplankton are eaten by small fish, that magnifies. Small fish are eaten by bigger fish, that magnifies. Then eaten by bigger fish, or you could replace this big fish with this big fish. Well, not a fish anymore, but we evolved from fish. That's why. Look, fish have teeth. I have teeth. Fish have spines. I have a spine. Interesting. Way back when we evolved from fish. So, the effects of pollutants, small, accumulate in the ocean, and then magnify up the trophic web until the apex predator, whether it's humans or whether it's dolphins or whales or sharks, feel those effects, and then they get the wrath of that marine pollution. So these things are banned. DDT, PCB, not everywhere. They should be, but they're not. Definitely by the United States. They live a long time. The environment, they've been found all the way even up into Antarctica. Mercury, released into the environment through the combustion of fossil fuels, especially coal, can have significant effects. There was a chemical plant in Minamata Bay, this is in Japan, that was releasing mercury. For a long time, people were starting to get poisoned, and there was a neurological disorder. Nobody knew what was happening. They named it Minamata disease. Turns out it was the mercury in the bay that was being consumed through people eating fish and shellfish. This is that bioaccumulation into biomagnification, getting to humans, and this is not okay. So now there's mercury everywhere, and we determine the safe levels of mercury by the concentrations. Some places, don't eat the fish. Too much mercury. Some places, you can eat the fish. There's not too much mercury. It'll be okay. So chemical pollutants disperse. They have a long residence time. And they come in a lot of different forms. Tritium, radioactive material, pollutant, harmful to organisms from the Fukushima Daiichi power plant melting down from the Tohoku earthquake, creating a tsunami. Other pollutants that we might not think about, hormones from birth control. When women eat ingestible birth control, it runs through them. So those hormones have the effect, of faking the body out to think that they're actually in their first trimester, which prevents production of eggs, which is the birth control. But those hormones actually go through, and they travel into the municipal waste stream through flushing down the toilet. Same thing with caffeine. Caffeine flows through us. Fertilizers, which are dumped all over, way too much, all over agriculture, all over the world. This stuff ends up in the oceans, and when it concentrates, it has negative effects. So there's a lot of pollution in the ocean from a lot of sources. I know. Gosh. Plastics. Okay. I'm missing a slide here. But that's okay. Sometimes you've just got to roll with it. Plastics are a significant form of pollution. In fact, they're the greatest form of pollution in the ocean. Plastics come from nurdles, which are pre-production plastic pellets, as we see here. They can be tiny microbeads, microplastics, pervasive in the environment now, probably inside you and I, made in clothes. They get into the water when we wash our clothes and eventually make their way into the oceans. These transport pollutants, they're eaten by fish, and right now there's about 46 million pounds of plastic in the Pacific Ocean. And they pool up in specific areas due to subtropical gyres, the counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and counterclockwise movement in the northern hemisphere of ocean currents due to, you got it, the Coriolis effect, giving us the Great Western Garbage Patch, the Great Eastern Garbage Patch, located in the Pacific Ocean. Basically, areas where trash, it's not like a landfill where it's like, wow, look at this mountain, but areas where you have condensed volumes of plastics in the ocean. So how do we reduce plastic? Well, we stop making it, we stop using it, and we stop buying it, is how we stop polluting it. There's initiatives to bring your own bag, to not use single-use plastic. This is Sacramento's band logo. Lots of countries around the world have outlawed plastic bags. The United States, nope. It's falling a little bit behind. Certain cities, yes. 100% certain states, yes, but we have yet to see a federal ban on plastic bags. So using less plastic bags, this is how we can go forward. International policy, MARPOL, the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships, proposes a treaty banning plastic bags. It's regulating dumping in the ocean, ratified by many nations in the world. So there's local action, there's federal action, there's international action. When we all come together with a shared cause and a shared vision, this is when we can really get things done. What can you do to prevent marine pollution? A lot of things. Stop using single-use plastics. Bring your reusable bamboo-ware or silverware. Support legislation to curb plastic production and waste. Vote for politicians who have an environmental agenda. Recycle. Put the recyclables in the correct bin so they stay out of the waste stream, out of landfills. Participate or create a beach cleanup, a river cleanup, something that helps clean the environment. Avoid products with microbeads. Do a little bit of research. See what's in your clothes. Spread the word. Talk about it. Conversations. Learn. Support organizations addressing plastic pollution. Nonprofits, non-governmental organizations. There's even governmental organizations. NOAA, NASA. These things have huge amounts of research that go into it. Education. Fresno City College, you're doing great. Maybe you want to go to UC San Diego, to the Scripps College of Oceanography, one of the foremost institutions of oceanography in the world, where you could work on this big issue, marine pollution. You can read news, science, journals, articles. You can watch documentaries. Love documentaries. They're great. You can support, give your money or your time to nonprofits. So there's so many things that you and I can do. And what's most important, I think, is learning and caring. Caring about the ocean. I go to the ocean a few times every summer, but I care deeply about it, because if the oceans aren't healthy, the earth isn't healthy. If the earth isn't healthy, then we're not healthy. And we can think about health on an individual basis. What is my health? I am a human. I feel healthy or not healthy. Well, our earth really has its own kind of health meter, right? So for me, does my stomach feel upset? Is my throat feeling upset? Did I cut my arm or scuff my knee, right? So how am I doing health-wise? Well, the earth has systems, and the ocean is a really big system. Maybe one of the largest. It covers 70% of the face of the earth. And so the health of our earth relies on the health of the oceans, and the more that we pollute the environment, the more unhealthy our earth becomes. So marine pollution is a global issue. Paramount importance. It's so important. Understanding this issue is key to solving this current crisis of marine pollution. And a global solution with local action is necessary to preserve the sustainability of the marine environment. So thank you so much for your time, your interest, and your care. The oceans need you, and you have a lot to contribute. Thank you, and have a nice day. Hi, students. Bonus, I found those slides that we were missing. Okay, so plastics. It felt like we was a little bit rushed and fast, and it was because I was missing my slides. And oh no, it's like my brain is here. Anyways, so plastics are the majority of marine debris. They float and they don't break down, which is why they're such a big deal. There's plastics like six-pack rings that entangle fish, mammals, and birds. They choke jellyfish, or they choke turtles, which they think are jellyfish. Birds ingest plastic. Here we can see so much plastic, there is no room for anything else. It's illegal to dump plastics in the ocean, but yet the oceans are full of plastic. Floating plastics attract oily toxic compounds such as DDT and PCBs that are still in the environment 50 years later because they persist, they don't break down. They're here, and they accumulate in plastics, achieving high levels of poisons that's very harmful. So plastics came on the scene in 1862, and then in the early 1900s, World War I, all of a sudden, we started to use them for commercial development, and since then, we have integrated plastic into everything we do. So we've got household uses. They're lightweight, they're strong, they're durable, they're inexpensive. Some of the problems associated with that is that they float, they entangle, they persist, they don't biodegrade, and they're mass produced. So these are advantages because they're cheap, they're easy to produce, and they're widespread. We use them for things that save lives like incubators, airbags, and safety equipment. Plastics have threaded into our entire existence. Plastics are the number one source of marine pollution, and they're a man-made item that originates on land and ends up in the ocean. If we can combat plastic production, then we are on the right path towards reaching sustainability with the marine environment. So there's all these other, I'm going to tie this all in together now. So there's all kinds of pollution: biological, sewage sludge, chemical, metals, point source, non-point source, but plastics is the big one. And if we can start to gear towards regulating and removing plastics from our ocean, then we can also in tandem work on some of these other sources of marine pollution, and we can get into a specific way where the amount of pollution isn't having such widespread, far-reaching negative impacts like it is today. There is, petroleum was the other one I was thinking of, because current practices are harming our oceans. But with you and me thinking, talking, and doing things, future practices can help save our oceans. So that's it. My last little piece. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.